Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'd just like to say thank you for everyone who's helped contribute to getting towards 3,000 subscribers so quickly. That's fantastic. And if you're watching from the future and that makes no sense at all, did Huddersfield Town avoid relegation again? Anyway, this video I'm going to be looking at continuing on from this, which is Cottage. We made that in the video that I'm going to link to above there. We made the exterior the other week. But again, it makes no sense if you're watching from the future. Anyway, let's go down to the workbench. I'll show you how it's done. So the first thing I'm going to do is push this out of the way. I want to mark out a base for the interior to sit on. So I've got a scrap piece of 1mm Foamex here. I'm just going to mark around the base of the cottage just to give me a rough idea of the shape that I need. Then I can just use a scalpel and cut that shape out. Now here on the base I've already got a little bulb connected to a battery underneath, and I'm just going to check whether this base fits. No, not quite yet. I just need to nick out a little bit to allow for the bulb. This is where the fireplace is going to be, so it's a flickering bulb. What I'm going to do eventually as well is I'm just going to nibble a little bit away of that bulb because it's a little bit too big. So now, checking that it fits. Yeah, that's just about right. But we just need to add a little bit more of a cutout to allow for the bulb to come a little bit further forward into the fireplace. So now just double check that again, and that should allow us to bring the wiring forward a bit. I'll just check whether the house sits back onto that base again. Yeah, that's fine. And now what I need to do is give the base piece a bit of a sand ready to paint. So I'll just make sure it's sanded all over. That gets the surface layer off of the foam to allow a bit of a key. Also gives it a nice rough surface to work with. So once we've got the surface keyed up, we can now just scribe in the stone details. I'm using my engineer's scribe here, marking out all the vertical lines first. Get a nice deep groove, then I'll just twist it round, and I'm going to do this by eye now instead of by the ruler. I'm just going to scribe in those alternating, can I get that word right? Alternating lines, just to create those tile marks. And then with a bit of ready mixed fix and grout I got from the discount store, I'm just going to smear that all over the surface of the floor here. So we're working it into all the gaps between the paving slabs and all over the surface, and this is going to give it a nice rough realistic stone surface eventually. All those little gaps between the slates will eventually be scratched back out again, but this is just to give it a nice bit of texture. Now I'll just double check that it fits in place again now. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but there we go, that's going to fit in place there. Now I'm going to start work on the internal walls even, and I've got a bit of a template left over from when I made the outside of the cottage, and I'll just use that to mark up a piece that I can use on a scrap piece. I'm just going to check whether this fits inside first, because obviously it's the same size as the external walls, so I'm going to trim off around about 2-3mm off each side of the wall. Just use the ruler and do it by eye, just making sure that the template fits first before we commit to card, and double checking there a little bit off camera. I wasn't really sure where my camera was. You can just about see there. See, I've just realised, and yeah, the template fits now. It's a little bit long, but we'll account for that in a little while. So I'll just stick that onto a piece of craft card. It's the same card that we used for creating the external shell, and then I can cut around it. So again, using my trusty scalpel and straight edge, we're just going to trim that to size. And now with another scrap piece of card, I can use the apex piece to mark out the height of the returning wall, the other side of the internal diorama. So I'll just mark on that with my trusty little set square, and then we'll cut it to size. There, that's the two pieces together there, and then we'll just check now. Again, final check to see whether they fit inside the cottage interior here. Let's get it the right way around first. So first the gable piece and then the return piece, and that's a good fit. Next we're going to mark out, using the remaining bits of template, the chimney breast area. I'm going to increase the thickness of that part of the wall with two pieces of two pieces of craft card. These are just the last remaining bits of scrap, so I'll just cut those out and layer them together. Now I've got those pieces together, I'll just mark out the roof area of the fireplace. Now I'm going to want to mark out a little area where I'm going to have a wood storage, and then above that is going to be the fireplace itself. Just mark it out with a pencil, and then I can use a scalpel to slowly start to gouge the cutout areas out. And with those finally cut out, I can just do one final check to see how it all fits in with the fireplace light. Just check with the return walls, see we've got enough clearance for the light to fix in, and that looks fine to me. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just paint the floor. So you've got this Vallejo light stone, and instead of using a palette I'm just going to squeeze it on, and with a small paintbrush just quickly cover the whole area. This is a nice thin paint, so it goes on quite well, and it's not going to obscure all those little grooves between all the paving slabs. So once we've painted it and let it dry, I'm going to use a Citadel contrast paint called Skeleton Horde. This is pretty much the same method of paint coverage that we did for the stone walls on the exterior of the cottage. Just painting it over in layers, just letting the tones build up. This contrast paint is quite a nice one for creating some rich warm tones. Then the next thing I'm going to do is add some Agrax Earth Shade. This is just darkening all the stone up. It's also going to settle into those grooves and define them a little bit more. Following on from letting the Agrax dry, I'm now going to go on with the black wash. This is Nuln Oil, well known to all those Citadel miniature painters out there. This is actually a bit of a cheat because I've run out of Nuln Oil, so it's a mix of Black Legion contrast paint and some matte medium. Once that's done and dried, we can then start rubbing in some Vallejo pigment powders. These are from the concrete and stone range, so there's a range from sienna to dark grey. And again, it's the same method I used for the exterior of the cottage. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But this is a nice way of building up a lovely stone texture, just brushing in layers. And then once that's done, the fun part can start, and we're going to scratch out all those paving slabs. It's not so easy to see here, but you can still see where all the marks are. This is quite a fun thing to do. And then we're going to break out the pigment powder again with the light sienna and just rub some powder back into those panels, the paving slabs, just to darken off that bright white, make it nice and worn looking again. And it's always it's quite good to use your finger just to make sure it's all rubbed in. A final thing to do after you've done this would be to give it a coat of matte varnish just to seal the whole thing. And then again, just a final check just to see if it fit. Well, we know it fits, just to see how it all looks when it's in situ. And now we're going to break out the trusty Das clay again. This is the air drying clay that we used to create the walls for the exterior of the cottage. What I'm going to do is just again roll out a nice little slab of clay with my rolling pin, and then finally, before we start sticking the clay on, we can glue those two parts of the walls together with some super glue. It's going to take a little bit of sticking here. Once that's glued in place, I'm just going to use a little bit of PVA to seal the walls. It's dual purpose, it both seals the card and gives a nice key for the foam clay. Not the foam clay, it's not foam clay at all, is it? The air drying clay to stick to. It's just having to work around the whole building, the whole wall, and make sure we've got glue everywhere, including all the way around this fireplace here. Once that's done, I can just start sticking, as I did with the exterior, just start sticking the clay in pieces all the way around the walls, just getting into those corners, smoothing it out until we've got a nice even coverage. I mean, it doesn't have to be too even because it's depicting a nice sort of rustic stone wall, but just pressing it in all the way around, making sure we cover all the surfaces and indeed all the way around the fireplace. So I can just use the end of the pair of tweezers here just to smooth the clay right into those recesses here to make sure we've got a nice depth of clay to show where the fireplace is. And that's it, pretty much covered in clay now. So just with the end of a paintbrush there, just tease it into place. Just check it sits on top of the slab, making sure I've got it on camera again. And then it's time to scribe again. As you can see there, I've already started a little bit, but I'm going to use a piece of cling film to scribe in with a pencil. This is to try and avoid all the little pull marks because the clay at this point isn't dry. It's quite a cold room, so it's taken a little bit of time to dry. I actually got a little bit fed up of using the cling film method, so I went straight to scribing into the naked clay. I'm just marking out the cornerstones, not the cornerstones, the curved stones of the fireplace here. Scratching in gradually just to create the shape of the stones. And then just continuing on through the rest of the interior walls, just very carefully scribing in the stonework. This is actually one of my favourite parts to do in making a model. It's very therapeutic, and you can just have as much fun with it as you want. Speed up the process there. Now I'm going to take a little piece of balsa wood, and we're just playing around with the inside and gluing on some internal wooden structures, carving off some of the edges to make them appear a bit rougher than it would normally be. And that's just the supports for the roof that isn't there. And one final piece for the side there. So with that done now, I'm just going to paint this little flagstone. This is the hearth piece. Just making that out of plastic and some tiny little pieces of wood here to represent the fire, the pieces of wood that are burning in the fire. I'll give that a wash of black before picking out some of the embers in oranges and reds to get that sort of glow effect. Now in the end I wasn't really happy with it being on styrene because it didn't have the translucent effect with the light bulb underneath, so just slightly off camera here I'm just slicing it off, or slicing the fire off that piece of styrene, so we've got the little wooden blocks there, and I'm going to glue that onto a piece of clear acrylic. That way we can have the light come shining through. I'm just going to paint the top around the wood, leaving a little sort of hole for the light to shine through underneath. So we should end up with, like you can see on here, a nice little transparent piece underneath for the light to shine through. I'll just finish blocking up the darker parts that you can see from the other side on the reverse with some more black paint, and then trying it against the light to see, and yes, as you can see there, we're just getting a nice sort of glow effect shining through. I'll just check it once again with the wall in place. There's a lot of checking and adjusting here, and now with a drill bit I'll just drill a little hole, not all the way through but just up until where the wood effect is, and this is just going to enable it to sit neatly on that little piece of bulb. It's not a little piece of bulb, it's a bulb that's sticking through. Now off camera I have shaved that so it's a lot smaller than it was originally. Those are just little bulbs that I rescued from an LED candle from Halloween, and now yet again just going to test it to fit. That's what it looks like with the light on, so happy enough with that, and we can move on to another part. So here I'm using another piece of balsa wood, the same wood I used for the framing of the walls, and I'm just going to mark out a piece for the mantelpiece. Whoops, that pinged off over there, didn't it? And I'm going to glue that on with a piece of super glue, just into position over the top of the fireplace there. Then I'm going to take another couple of small bits of balsa wood and cut some supports. And I'm just going to use some smaller pieces again to create some shelves at the side of the fireplace there. These are just going to be placed quite wonky, just to keep in character with the old sort of quaint interior of the cottage. So several pieces either side. That one was a little bit tricky to get in there. And finished off with one just above the mantelpiece in a slightly asymmetrical fashion, very haphazard. And now I'm just going to make a little table. So cut a piece of balsa wood for the top and some long supports underneath, and with some cocktail sticks I've just added a little bit of extra thickness with some masking tape, and I'm going to stick them into my Dremel. And you've got to imagine the noise of the Dremel here. I muted it because it was just a little bit too loud, but using a file I'm just going to turn some shapes into the table supports. Really was quite satisfying doing this, and I'll do a bit of a better video at some later date showing how to do this, and just cut the end of it off there with a scalpel now. So we get 4 roughly similarly sized legs for the table. Just off the top there you can see a little figurine that I used for scale, and I'm going to stick those to the underside of the table using some super glue. We've also got some wooden panels in between each of the legs. It's kind of representing a sort of farmhouse table. Again, I'll probably show a better video of this at some point showing how I make small furniture, but for now this is the table. And then we go back to the walls for the internals. Again, like I did with the outside wall, I'm giving it a light coat of stone, squeaking it straight onto the wall to sort of save on palette use. Next I'm going to use light wood to coat the interior woodwork. So we'll just paint over all the lengths inside. And what I did after this was coat it with a wash of dark wood, dark brown, but I forgot to record it. And now sticking in the base, so that's in once and for all. And this little piece, I'm using some bamboo sticks to create the firewood that's going to just stick underneath the fireplace. I'm going to super glue them all together but not stick them in place because I need to keep it removable so I can paint it and then stick it in finally. And then, as the same as the floor and the outside of the walls, we give it a treatment of a dark brown wash to begin with, followed up once it's dry with a black wash just to darken all the stonework off, and just cover the whole thing thoroughly. This is just highlighting all the individual stones, making sure all the shadows and gaps are covered. And once this is done, again with the pigments, starting off with some darker shades, just brushing it very, very sort of haphazardly and thoroughly into all the nooks and crannies. And then once we've got the darker shades done, we can go over with the light shade. Again, just brushing it very, very thoroughly, hoping for the lighter shades to actually settle between the mortar gaps. And it's starting to look like a nice worn stone. Then at the back here, I'm going to glue a piece of black foam so we can't see through to the back of the fireplace. Plenty of super glue there, that'll hold it in place. So it's just a little piece of black foam. Then the removable block of firewood we can just coat with a dark brown wash again to give it a more aged effect. And then with a pair of tweezers stick that in place. The walls are now in place onto the stone floor. And at this point I'm now going to add some handmade furniture that I made. Again, I'm going to probably make another video showing how I made that in detail. There's not really much time for it now, but we've got a little rocking chair, the table that you saw me making earlier, a little chair to sit at the table. The rocking chair was actually a favourite of mine. There is actually, if you want to have a look, there's a short on my channel showing you how it was made. Now there's a little cauldron in the fireplace, and that's the lid for the cauldron. And here we can see Clive. Clive is one of the little skulls that sits on the shelf. So this is a little citadel skull from their sort of basing range. I've painted it white, glued it in place. He's got a little friend, shall we call him Kevin? Clive and Kevin. And then just to finish that off, give them a little coat of Citadel Skeleton Horde, aptly named. It just gives it a more aged look. So that's it finished now. All that's needed to be done now is to add the little witch in her rocking chair, this little handmade broom, and then of course what witch's cottage isn't complete with a portrait hanging over the mantelpiece. And if you know who this is, please let me know in the comments. If you can tell me who this is, then I'll give you a credit in the next video. If you like my content, please let me know in the comments, give me a like and consider subscribing. I'd like to thank my Coffee Club subscribers for continuing to support me, and if you'd like to join my list of supporters, the link to my coffee is below down in the description. It's like Patreon but takes less of a cut, and for just £3 a month you get access to my Discord channel for behind the scenes pictures and videos, a lovely community chat group and access to direct messages. As the channel grows, the perks will too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.